Hello and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Casey. Ukraine's parliament has passed a new anti-corruption bill, rolling back a law enacted earlier this month that provoked protests and international backlash, owing to fears that it was watering down the country's efforts to battle graft. On the ground in the Ukrainian capital is our correspondent, Oz Chatterjee. Good afternoon, Oz. Given the protests and pressure from Ukraine's Western partners, does today's vote mark a genuine turning point for anti-corruption reforms, or is it more of a political damage control move from the Zelensky administration?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think it's probably somewhere in between those two things. It's certainly something that European partners wanted Ukraine to enact. And following days of protests, which I think really took the government by surprise, this has forced a U-turn from Zelensky. Now, it passed comfortably through the Rada. 331 deputies voted in favor of the bill, which would restore independence to those two anti-corruption bodies, those major anti-corruption bodies, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. So those are Ukraine's leading anti-corruption bodies. And following that move last week, on July 22nd, when it was signed into law, Zelensky tried to remove the independence of those bodies, citing various reasons, really trying to bring those bodies under his control, his government's control. This triggered that wave of protests that we saw, that you're seeing on your screen now. And protests continued. There were 3 days of major protests, but there was still a smaller protest continuing until this bill finally went through Parliament. Zelensky last week promised that he would look again at the bill and try to reverse that. The question is, will Zelensky's movement be enough to persuade those voters or to rebuild trust between those protesters and Zelensky's government? It must be remembered that Ukraine is under martial law. There are no elections going to be happening anytime soon, while Ukraine remains to be under martial law. So the people are basically stuck with this government. They have no opportunity to change it. So that requires a lot of buy-in from the people. There has to be a lot of legitimacy granted to the government by the people for this relationship really to move forward. So this reversal by Zelensky, the Ukrainian government will be hoping, will be persuading those protesters that the government has gone far enough, that it has restored those anti-corruption bodies their independence. The question will it be enough? And we'll find out, I suppose, in the next few days. So far, it looks like the protesters seem to be satisfied with the conclusion of this bill. But look, it's a fluid situation on the ground, and anything more that develops, we'll be bringing you all of that right here on TVP World.
Oz Chatterjee reporting for us live from Kyiv. Many thanks. Now let's cross to our Brussels correspondent, Angela Skujins. The EU has been watching closely everything that's happening in Ukraine, all the political developments, especially the vote to restore the independence of key anti-corruption bodies. Good afternoon, Angela. How is Brussels reacting to Ukraine's move to restore the independence of its anti-corruption bodies?
Yes, so what we've heard from politicians as well as spokespeople is they warmly welcome this development in Ukraine today, but it comes with a side of caution. The European Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Koz, posted on social media platform X that today's bill receiving enough support in Ukrainian Parliament. This is a good step for Ukraine. However, challenges remain. We heard from the European Commission spokesperson, Guillaume Mercer, who explained exactly what these anti-corruption challenges are that Ukraine will need to forge ahead with to complete. This includes appointing the head of the Economic Security Bureau of Ukraine, as well as appointing 4 internationally vetted judges to the Constitutional Court, as well as another litany of other issues. However, he did say that today's developments was a good first step in undoing the damage that was wrought last week since Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed that bill.
The Rada has restored key safeguards ensuring the independence of the anti-corruption bodies. In our view, the new law addresses the key challenges of NABU and SAPO's independence. We will, however, need to check the final text as it has just been adopted. Let me, however, underline that this is not the end of the process.
It's also important to note that many critics in the Belgian capital have stated that this saga is a nasty blight on Ukraine's EU accession bid. It formally launched that application in 2022 following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Many see this as an attempt for the war-torn country to shore up alliances as well as security and defence. But Ukraine has some serious anti-corruption issues that it needs to address. This is exactly why the European Union only allocated €3 billion as part of its Ukraine facility instead of the $4.5 billion that could have been allocated. An issue, however, regarding its EU accession status is that anti-corruption reforms sit at the very beginning of its story. But when countries such as Hungary block Ukraine from moving forward with its EU accession bid, it cannot address some of these things in a more formal manner like Brussels would like to see. So this saga is also giving fuel to the fire of certain EU member states such as Hungary as exactly why it's not ready to join the European Union. But we've heard European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen state earlier this year that she wants Ukraine to join the 27 member state strong club by the end of the decade. So we'll have to wait and see whether Ukraine can clean up its act and agree to commit to these anti-corruption reforms as it has promised.
And obviously, we mustn't forget that Russia attacked Ukraine yet again before that vote passed through. Angela Skujins, many thanks for that update from Brussels. At least 8 people were killed, including a child, and 124 more were wounded after a swarm of Russian drones and missiles attacked Kyiv. The overnight attack came shortly after US President Donald Trump threatened to impose new tariffs on Russia within 10 days unless the Kremlin agrees to halt its offensive operations in Ukraine. The strike mainly targeted Kyiv's Solomyansky district, where they struck a school and a residential building. Another residential building was damaged in the Holosivsky district. Russian drones also targeted the Shevchenkivsky neighborhood, where they struck the children's ward of a local hospital. As a result of the attacks, a fire broke out at one of the impact sites, with burning vehicles reported in the vicinity. Drone debris was also reported to have hit a high-rise residential building. Overall, Russian drones struck at least 27 locations around the Ukrainian capital.
There was a second air raid alert. I got up, took my phone and saw that 5 cruise missiles were headed for Kyiv. I tried to wake up my wife, but then there were explosions, and that was it. Our daughter is now in the hospital.
I don't have windows left in my kitchen, but I came out here to help. I came to call an ambulance and the emergency services. I was lying down when I heard something flying. I dropped to the floor and the wall collapsed on me.
Following a wave of deadly Russian missile and drone attacks, President Zelensky said on Telegram that the strikes prove peace with Russia cannot be achieved without force, urging Western allies to act on their commitments to help stop further aggression.
Since nightfall, our rescuers, firefighters, medics and all the emergency services have been working at the sites of Russian missile and drone attacks. Dnipro, Poltava, Sumy, Mykolaiv and Kyiv regions were affected. The capital was the main target of a massive strike with considerable damage to infrastructure. In one of the residential districts, an entire staircase in a high-rise building was destroyed. As of now, 6 people have been killed, including a 6-year-old boy. My condolences to all the affected families. We also know about dozens of wounded people, and we are providing them with the necessary assistance.
Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev is entering very dangerous territory, US President Donald Trump has said in a post on social media. The comment follows Medvedev's recent statement that Trump's ultimatum game with Moscow poses a threat to Russia and pushes the US towards a war.
I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together for all I care. We have done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. Likewise, Russia and the USA do almost no business together. Let's keep it that way. And tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory.
A significant rise in HIV infections has been reported within the Russian army, with cases increasing 20-fold since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in 2022.
According to a report by The Times, the number of HIV infections among Russian soldiers has surged dramatically, reaching alarming levels. The situation worsened during Russia's military mobilization, with high infection rates recorded during this period. Russia is one of the top 5 countries in the world with regard to HIV infection rates, with over 1 million registered cases. Experts believe that the actual number could exceed 1.5 million. Russia alone accounted for nearly 4% of the world's HIV infections in 2021, despite its population being less than 2% of the global total.
And breaking news from Lithuania. Lithuanian Prime Minister Gitautas Paluckas has resigned as the leader of the government and his political party, the Social Democrats. This decision comes following investigations into his past business dealings. This development follows a statement of one of Palukas' coalition partners. The leader of the Democratic Union declared his party would not remain in the governing coalition if Palukas continued to serve as prime minister. On Thursday morning, Lithuania's Financial Crime Investigation Service raided the offices of a company owned by Palukas' sister-in-law. The company had received European Union subsidies and used them to purchase battery systems from a company partially owned by the prime minister. Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda announced Palukas' resignation to the media on Thursday morning. Palukas confirmed the news via a statement released through his party, the Social Democrats. He became prime minister in December last year. It remains to be seen who will succeed him. On Thursday, Polish Finance Minister Andrzej Domański announced a tougher stance on aggressive tax optimization and the use of transfer pricing. He also announced new intensive measures to combat tax evasion in Poland. In a briefing on Thursday, Domański stated that Polish entrepreneurs have the right to compete fairly on the market and that the aggressive use of transfer prices distorts this competition. He also relayed that the Ministry of Finance continues to conduct customs and tax audits and has changed the rules for assessing audit tasks to ensure greater monetary effects for the state budget. The minister also added that tax underpayments using transfer pricing, which amounted to 30% higher than those of 2023, were detected. Domański also announced that a center to combat tax evasion will be established in Kraków to facilitate the exchange of know-how regarding transfer pricing audits. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced on Wednesday evening that Canada will recognize Palestine as a state at the UN's General Assembly meeting in September. Israel and the United States have already denounced the decision, saying it rewards Hamas and harms the efforts of achieving a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
Canada intends to recognize the state of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
Poland has reaffirmed Warsaw's 1988 recognition of Palestinian statehood as more UN member states are openly considering following suit.
The international initiative was kick-started following a UN conference on the war in Gaza earlier this week. TVP World reached out to the Polish Foreign Ministry for comment and received a letter reaffirming Warsaw's 1988 recognition of Palestinian statehood and commitment to a two-state solution to the conflict. According to Foreign Ministry spokesman Paweł Wroński, Poland is ready to allocate an additional $1 million in humanitarian aid for Palestinians as the threat of mass starvation in the Gaza Strip grows.
And that concludes Midday Report. Thank you so much for being with us and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.